Della Fattoria is the reason I'm a baker. Now, I imagine this like perfect stainless steel, pristine French laundry style bakery. It was the polar opposite from that. You know, like there was bakers walking around where they're covered in tattoo like I am today, torn off jeans, bandanas, listening to rock and roll music, just making bread. It was mind-blowing.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. What a terrific episode dedicated to the world of bread. First up is a conversation with Richard Hart, an icon in the clubby world of sourdough. Richard has an amazing story to tell, and we get into his London upbringing and how he ended up in California working for Tartine. But that's where the story just starts to get good. He teams up with Rene Redzepi to open a humble bakery, Hart Bakery, in Copenhagen, and the rest is history. Richard Hart, my friends, is a wonderful guest, and we talk about his first cookbook, the terrific Richard Hart Bread. But the bread fun continues. I also have on the talented writer and recipe developer Lukas Volger to talk about his book, The Bread Machine Book. Yes, the iconic bread machine now has a cookbook with recipes that cover so many different styles. Lukas and I dig into his process for writing recipes for the machine and so much more. What a terrific episode. I hope you enjoy it. Richard Hart, welcome to This Is Taste. Finally great to meet you. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Matt. I'm really, really happy to be here. Yeah.
I can't wait to talk all about Richard Hart Bread, your debut cookbook. And we have so much to cover, your baking, your work with the bear. I mean, so much to cover. But I have to ask, you're in New York for a few days. Where do you like to go when you stop by?
I guess I go to Superiority Burger every time I come. I love Brooks. I love Superiority Burger. It's fucking dirty.
Yeah.
It's dirty food that's actually healthy.
Yeah.
What? How is that even a thing?
So the collard greens.
Yeah. I mean, what?
Like what?
You're eating this vegetable that's super dirty but super good for you.
Yeah.
Brooks is amazing. Wild Air.
Yeah.
It's an institution now, which is kind of funny.
Decade long.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like, it's an institution and a decade. I remember the first time I went there and had that potato with the uni on top. That rocked my world.
I love that. It's like a pomme de fin. It's like with uni. So good.
It rocked my world. Yeah. Really, really incredible.
And the chocolate tart. You gotta always look at that one too.
Those guys are really lovely.
Those are great.
Really
what about on the bread side? I mean, you're always asked this question, I realize, when you're in a city.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I haven't found. I mean, there was one bread that I ate by Jim LaHaye.
Yeah.
An old OG baker.
For sure.
And it had grapes. It was like a focaccia with grapes in. And that sticks in my mind.
Yeah.
You know what? Mainly when I come here, I go out to eat in restaurants rather than bakeries. And I get inspired a lot by chefs rather than bakers. One place that sticks in my mind that I really want to go to that I went to years and years ago, which has reopened, is Blanca.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
New chef.
Yeah, I mean,
Same
when
place.
I ate there years ago, my mind was blown. Yeah. So I would really love to go back and visit that. And it seems like whenever I'm here, it's the days that they're not open.
Yeah.
So I need to kind of figure out my schedule to get it right.
Great reminder. I gotta get there.
Yeah, Ivan Ramen too.
Oh yeah.
I love Ivan. I think he's a fucking legend.
Yeah.
Talking to him makes me so happy. And I think he's an incredible man. So yeah, I think
so good. Well, Richard, let me ask you, just for our audience, set up like where you are operating, because I know you were in Copenhagen for a while, and we'll talk about your bakeries there. Now you're in Mexico. I'd love to get a sense of where you're operating. I know you have your Mexico bakery that's going to open soon. Where are you at right now?
Yeah, so I live in Mexico City. I've been there for 2 years. I moved there because I have children that live in California and I needed to be really close to them. So from Mexico, I fly up and see my kids every month. It's worked out really lovely. It's a really good thing. So Copenhagen for me was incredible time. Like, I loved my partners. They did amazing things for me. I loved the food scene there. Everyone all the chefs from around the world come to Copenhagen.
Yeah.
You got to see everyone. So they always came to the bakery. It was brilliant. So yeah, leaving Copenhagen was a mental thing, but like I just needed to be closer to my kids.
Yeah.
So Mexico seemed to make sense. Like the food scene right now, I feel like is kind of similar to when I first moved to Copenhagen. It feels like it's on fire. Like it feels like lots of cool stuff's happening. Lots of chefs are opening things. There's a buzz in Mexico City, and again, lots of people are coming.
Yeah. What's your opening like there? What are you looking to do?
So I'm opening a bakery there. It was named by my 12-year-old son called Jude.
Okay.
He called it Green Rhino.
Beautiful name.
He's been obsessed with rhinos since he was a young kid, and particularly the color green. And so he said it, and I said, yeah, of course I'm going to call it that. I loved the name. It was a brilliant idea, and he's so proud that we're calling it his name.
Right.
So it's going to be a bakery. We're going to look into all Mexican tropical fruits, corn. Just try and rework things. Look at what the history of Mexican baked goods are and stuff.
Wow, amazing. I mean, when you moved to Mexico, what are you cooking with like right away? That's like, wow, I haven't ever used these products.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many tropical fruits. Like they're literally, I can't even name half of them. Like there's so many. Like, and it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many types of bananas, so many types of avocados, I thought there were 2 types of avocados. There's hundreds, you know, and all different sizes, and you can eat the skin. And I feel like we're kind of spoiled.
I mean, so are you going to open soon?
We are going to open in the middle of April.
Okay.
So I'm going away to Australia. We're going to do the Melbourne Food Festival. We're going to do a Hart Bakery Green Rhino mashup in Melbourne for a pop-up, for a week-long pop-up. And as soon as we get back, we're going to open.
Beautiful. I can't wait to visit.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get a little bit into your baking history and go back. But before we do, I want to talk about the introduction to your book, which I love. And props to your collaborator, Lori Wolver. And we'll say her name again, but Lori is terrific. And clearly called something out of you. Because this intro is really fascinating because while the book is highly technical, and of course it's grams, and of course there's technique, and you've got great QR codes, and you can bake so many different styles of sourdoughs and other breads. You kind of like say basically you don't like the science part of it. It makes you itchy. And Richard, it's cool like knowing you for a few minutes. I get a sense that you're like you're run by spirit and you're run by energy of creativity. But when you're baking, it's a real like yes or no kind of math problem. How do you negotiate these 2 parts of your world?
You know, I think the way I learned in California, I became a baker in California. I cooked for 12 years in lots of fancy restaurants, and then I became a baker. And I started off learning in a bakery, but it was kind of scientific. Everything was run by numbers and time. And then when I moved to my next bakery, Tartine, things became a little more hippified, you know, a bit more like feel. Does it feel okay? Is it this way? Is it that way? And I loved that sense. And I think maybe that's part of being a cook or something like that. It just spoke to me completely. And I can't ever look back. Like I just, as I said in the book, I get out geeked in a second.
Yeah.
Like you start talking to me about these things. Okay, I don't fucking know about that. You know, like I just want to make good bread and hopefully people love it.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, looking at Chad Robertson's style and starting with the wood-fired baking and really the way that, I guess once you do a recipe a few hundred times, you can then, the jazz starts happening.
Yeah. Also, like Chad started wood-fired baking in his bakery, and me the same. Like I was baking wood-fired for a couple of years before going to Tartine. And like, so we both had that similar beginning, I guess. And yeah, literally, in the end, I just measured a handful of salt would be 50 grams. You know, I know that one hand, like, it would be like that. Because, you know what, if a couple of grams extra, a couple of grams under, it doesn't really fucking matter. Like, it really doesn't, you know? Like, imagine, like, before there were scales, that wasn't that long ago. People were still making good bread, or bread, you know? Like, you can do it. Yeah.
No, it's well said, and it frees you a bit as a baker, as a home baker. I mean, you're going to definitely have some failed experiments. Well, before we get to your California phase, I want to go all the way back to London.
Yeah.
And hear a little bit about your food growing up with you. And you write in the book about how you were really into the rave scene. Like, it seemed like you weren't just like a raver, but you were. And so I had to like ask, like, what's the rave scene like for you?
Oh, shit. So, yeah, London, food, growing up. You know, you hear all these chef stories about how their grandma was this amazing Italian cook and they used to go in. I had none of that. I didn't know anything about food. I didn't come from a food background. Like, I mean, we ate food. My mum cooked, but, I mean, it was just fine. No one was really into it, you know? So I didn't really understand about food until I started my career in a burger diner, flipping burgers, cooking pizzas, fries. Like, I loved the jokes and stuff inside that kitchen. After that, I was in a kitchen that was similar to TGI Fridays. I mean, it was shit. Like, it was shitty food, but I loved that feeling of being in the kitchen. And then from then on, I went to a department store, Selfridges, in the middle of town. And, you know, I didn't even know what basil was. I didn't know anything.
Wow.
I didn't know any herbs. I mean, I was an 18-year-old kid with no knowledge of food. And pretty much I learned everything there.
Yeah.
But like literally I was working to party. That's all I wanted to do. I wore fucking crazy clothes and went partying, wearing platform shoes, my hair probably all over the place.
Is this like is this like the Manchester scene era?
Yeah,
like
maybe
Hacienda.
So I guess I left school in the mid-90s. So it's into the late 90s and early 2000s. We were going to Ibiza, literally raving for a whole 2 weeks, you know, going to party after party after party, doing all kinds of naughty stuff, you know, like really lived that life. And you know what? I loved it. I loved dancing on the dance floor. You know, the thing about the rave scene was it wasn't about picking up chicks or going to meet girls, or it was about going to dance and listen to great music and be with your friends and love the people you're with. And you know what? It wasn't that creepy nightclub thing that kind of was happening in other scenes. It was just like going to party and dance.
So tell me, like, 3 bands from that era that you're
wasn't
like
really bands.
I use bands, but DJs, of course. I use the
it was like there was a guy called Tony DeVee. He's dead. He was a hard house DJ. He was incredible. There's a guy from New York called Danny Tenaglia.
Yeah.
He's still DJing today. He's like the DJ's DJ.
Yeah.
And he's incredible. I've had many great nights with him.
A fixture of limelight. A fixture of...
Yeah. Like, honestly, like, if I could see him now, I would love to go party to Danny Tenaglia because he's an incredible DJ. Like, he really just knows what to do with a crowd. I don't really go out partying anymore, but I would like to.
Yeah, I'm sure you could find something,
yeah,
you know, like
a little bit of energy in me still to
I think,
put
like,
it
you
off.
could find something in Mexico. I'm sure there's some great parties.
I'm sure he'll go, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So you end up in California. So, Richard, take me back to the first time you walked into Della Fattoria in Petaluma.
Della Fattoria is the reason I'm a baker. If it wasn't for that place, I would never be a baker today. I would still cook. And I loved cooking. I never thought I would become a baker. I walked into Della Fattoria. It's a barn attached to the owner's house on this ranch property, this farm. There's chickens, sheep, vegetables, California sunshine. It's like perfect. You walk into this barn and there's these 2 roaring wood-fired ovens. And like, I can't believe people still made bread like that. Like, I never imagined to see that in my life. The only reason I'd heard of Della Fattoria is because the restaurant I was working in, the chef said, oh, they used to make bread for the French Laundry before they had Bouchon Bakery. And I was like, wow, okay, I know French Laundry. It must be amazing. And I imagine this like perfect stainless steel, pristine French Laundry style bakery. And it couldn't be it was the polar opposite from that. You know, like there was bakers walking around where they're covered in tattoos, like I am today, covered in tattoos, torn off jeans, bandanas, listening to rock and roll music, just making bread. It was mind blowing.
And you spent some time there.
I was there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I transitioned from cooking into baking because I just had to do it. Like, I couldn't believe how incredible. I mean, these guys were baking bread the same as 1,000 years ago. Like, everything was loaded in with these long peels, like long, like, I don't know, 2 meters, I don't know, 8 feet long or something, you know, like it was an incredible thing to witness. And it's just a shame they actually don't do it like that anymore, because like the house, the owner of the house, Ed, he's getting older and like it doesn't quite work with how it was anymore. So they've stopped baking there, which is a real shame. But that place, it's incredible.
The look on your face. Just says it. I mean, it's you're like going back. I mean, you're looking at the sky.
I could be there, and I just wish I could take you there right now, because to see it, it was mind blowing.
You make the choice to work with Chad Robertson at Tartine, and you write in the book how you would drive from your home in Sonoma County down to San Francisco to work there.
I mean, I didn't make the choice. I was desperate to work there. You know, like I after trying Chad's bread, I was desperate to work there. And like as a chef, if I wanted a job, I probably could have got it. You know, I would go to the restaurant, I would work for free on my days off, I would go, and eventually someone would leave and I would get a job. Tartine, that didn't happen. I went there, can I come and work? No, I'm sorry, there's no space. Hey, can I do this? No, I'm sorry. So it took me about a year to get a job working for Chad.
Wow.
The moment I tried his bread, I took a loaf of his bread to Kathleen, the owner of Della Fattoria, and she said to me, wow, doesn't this make you green with envy? And like it did, like, and inside me, I'm like, oh man, I have to work here. I don't know how they've made this bread, but I really need to know. Like, I was desperate to work at Tartine.
Describe, Richard, what this bread is, because I think like you've got great bread at Della Fattoria, and you've got like a city that is known for bread, and you got a state,
and whole area,
like California, best bread in America, but you're not satisfied with what you're doing. What is it?
This bread from Tartine at the time, it was everything. Like I couldn't believe it. Like lots of other breads, they look good, they're fine, but when you taste it, it kind of just falls a little flat on your palate. Tartine's bread does not do that. It like you start eating and chewing and it keeps evolving in your mouth. Like, you know, when you go to a restaurant and you eat a fine dining restaurant, you eat this one bite and this bite just keeps going and you feel these, you know, the Ratatouille movie fireworks in your head. You could get that from a loaf of bread and a piece of bread, and that was it. You know, like it was a game changer. Like the crust was just delicious and the crumb was so tender, and there was something about it that was special. And at the time at Della, I just didn't know what it was.
You ended up figuring it out by working at that. Were you really driving back and forth?
Yeah, I drove back and forth every day. Like it was about an hour and 20 minutes there and an hour and 20 minutes home. The thing is, in Sonoma County, we lived on a 5-acre farm with a swimming pool, and like there was goats and chickens, and we got eggs and vegetables, and it was paradise. So we couldn't afford that in the city. Like, so it just made sense to do the commute.
I'm Nomi Fry.
I'm Vincent Cunningham.
I'm Alex Schwartz, and we are Critics at Large, a podcast from The New Yorker. Guys, what do we do on the show every week?
We look into the startling maw of our culture and try to figure something out.
That's right. We take something that's going on in the culture now. Maybe it's a movie, maybe it's a book, maybe it's just kind of a trend.
And we expand it across culture as kind of a pattern or a template.
Join us on Critics at Large from The New Yorker. New episodes drop every Thursday. Follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, you see this passion that Chad Robertson had at Tartine in the character on the bear, that I feel like I want to take a little break from your bio and hit that, because I feel like the way that Marcus thinks about food and has that real drive that you exhibit, that Chad exhibits. And of course, you're cited on the show in season 1. I mean, like you're by name, which is kind of remarkable, which is like cool. I mean, it's a cool thing. It's got to be. What's it like being part of like this big pop culture moment in the States? And talk about working with the actor Lionel Boyce, who's brilliant in that role.
I became quite good friends with Matty Matheson in Copenhagen and stuff, and he come to the bakery. So I get a text message from Matty. But the bear's nothing at this stage. No one knows what it is. It hasn't even been made. Hey, man, can I send my guy to you? Like, you know, like how Matty is. Can I send my guy to you? And I'm like, yeah, man, of course you can. You know, so they sent Lionel to come and hang out with us for 2 weeks. He's an actor. He's never really been in a kitchen. We have to train him to try and look like a baker. It was in December, which is the busiest time of year for any bakery. You know, we're crazy. But like I had a really strong team and I just, of course, you know, I'm going to help my friend out and send this guy for this show that, who knows, maybe it's going to be a show, maybe it's not, you know, like no one knew that the bear was going to, well, back then you didn't know the bear was going to be the sensation it became today. And so Lionel came and he was one of the producers came also. And like, they were just lovely guys. And you know what? My bakery, we have fun. It's not fucking stressful. It is stressful, but like have fun. Like we listen to music, we make jokes, like we just fuck around. We make great food, great product, but we do it on our terms, having fun. And so like we just included him. He became one of the family, you know, like, and he got in there and we just joked with him and we tried to teach him as best we could. And then the first episode, you know what, the first show came out and I couldn't watch it actually. Like I hear this a lot.
Triggering.
Yeah, I hear it a lot actually, but like I just, you know, I don't watch a lot of TV. I watched the first episode. There was so much fucking screaming and shouting and angst in there, and I was like, you know what, fuck this. I can't watch it. So like it wasn't until like a few weeks go by that I started getting texts from everyone with a picture of my face and like this clip where I'm on the bear and I'm like, what? You know, it was crazy. So I hadn't watched it. And yeah, it was really nice. I started watching it after the fact because I was like, fuck, I have to watch this, you know, like see what it was about.
Just having, you know, all these bakeries in Copenhagen with your face on this big show, it's gotta be good for business, I would say.
Yeah, I think it was really good for business.
But the spirit of Malcolm's character, it feels like it's inspired by this camaraderie that you have at your bakery.
Yeah, he's a sweet guy in it too, isn't he? He's super sweet, but he's thoughtful and dedicated and you know what? I am that 100%. I don't stop thinking about bread. I've made this bread literally last week, and I can't stop thinking about it. Like it's in my head, and I just want to go back to Mexico and make it again and just try and get it just right, you know? Like I've been in my career for years, and I'm still super obsessed, super thoughtful.
It's wonderful to hear. It's great that you can maintain that creativity and also just like
excitement,
the angst.
And and I
nuttiness.
feel it always. Like I was talking to the actor yesterday, Tony, and like we were talking about if you're obsessed in your industry, you're kind of the same, you know, like you're constantly thinking how you can tweak this or tweak that. And
catch Richard with Tony Shalhoub on a show to be determined. All right, back to your bio, because this is an important moment. You're working at Tartine, you're running stuff there, and you're become part of this really iconic bakery. You meet Rene Redzepi.
Yeah.
And Rene, and he told me this when he was in a few months ago, a little bit about this history, but you are recruited by Rene to open a bakery in Copenhagen with the guy from Noma. What's that like? I mean, you don't like seem like a Noma guy.
I'm not a Noma guy. I'll tell you a story about this as well, but like okay, so I met Rene a couple of times with Chad. The last time was in Australia. We were doing the Melbourne Food Festival with Tartine. We went to the Noma pop-up, and afterwards Rene said, hey, do you know any guys that would want to come and bake with us? And at the time I was like, nah, no way, man. I'm super happy in California. And just the years went on, and I just felt like I wanted to get back to Europe and like get away and get closer to my home, England. And so I ended up reaching out to Rene and saying, hey, you still looking for that baker? And he was like, man, I'm so happy to get your email. What do you want? And at the time I was like, yeah, I want a bakery in London. And I want a bakery in Paris, which is pretty ambitious, you know?
Yeah.
And he was like, look, come to Copenhagen, open one here. You can go wherever you want. And I picked up my small family and we moved to Denmark. Like, I mean, it was thrilling. It was exciting. Like Noma is the shit.
Still is.
It's the shit.
Still is.
Noma is.
Yeah.
Rene's incredible. Like you talk to him and you just can't help, like if in a crowd, like you can't help but be in awe of him. He's like, there's magic about this man that makes you want to go, yes. And Noma is amazing. Like I remember the first time I went to Noma with Chad, I was like, but is it food though? Is it actually food? Or is it like, hey, smell this and here's this? And you know what? It is really food. It's actually amazing, delicious food that is beautiful, and it's an incredible place.
So let me ask you this, Richard. Like What did Renee see in you as a business partner? And like, what were you thinking when he comes to you and wants to like work together? Because this is like the guy with exacting standards. I think he's like gotten over some of his anger stuff, but it was clearly there.
Yeah.
So like, that's a little intimidating.
Yeah. Also, I'd worked in fine dining for a long
You
time.
said that,
I'd worked
right.
for a lot of chefs who I felt that power of them. So I knew what that industry was like, and I was a little nervous to get myself back into that because I was working at Tartine. We were hippie bakers. It was all fun. So yeah, coming to Copenhagen. I mean, I found Renee incredible that he trusted me to open most of Renee's partners have worked for Renee. And I find it incredible that Renee saw something in me and we partnered without ever working together. Because to be honest, I could have been shit. I could have been absolute bullshit. Just because my resume reads that I've worked at Tartine, that doesn't mean. Actually, you look at a lot of resumes and it means nothing.
Well, you're hiring all the time.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
that.
It mean like you hire people with great resumes and they could be terrible. So like, there's something he saw in me that just he thought was right, and like we did it, and I'm happy that like Hart Bakery is an incredible success, and I proved him right, because I was going to come here and I was going to make sure I proved him right. At first I was really nervous because I had this vision of bread in my head from America, like this perfect sourdough loaf, and I was like, look, Noma's a Danish only restaurant, like a Scandinavian only restaurant. You use only Scandinavian ingredients. I've got to be honest with you, to make my style of bread, I don't think I can use only Scandinavian wheat. And if that's a problem for you, we might not be able to do this. And he said, look, man, I don't care what you do. Just make the best bakery.
That's great. That's like the kind of like leadership you need when you're a partner.
Yeah. I
you
don't care what you do. Just do your thing.
But reading the cookbook and going to Hart Bakery, and you have 10 locations now, Copenhagen alone. I mean, you clearly adapted to the Danish sensibility because there's many months where your customers are Danes.
Yeah.
And maybe some Europeans.
Yeah.
So you couldn't only do American-style breads.
And
what was that like for you, the evolution?
Actually, like when I first got there as an American baker, I'm English, but I was an American baker, I would say.
Yeah.
We started this opening menu, and you know what? The Danes were so fucking confused. Like there was all this savoury Danish pastries and stuff and things that I thought that people would want to eat. They were like, what the fuck's this? They didn't want that. They want Danish should be sweet. So quite quickly we changed our menu really fast to adapt the Danish palate, So, like we looked at what the Danes eat, what they have emotional connection to. Like you have to be of place.
Yeah.
And I've learned that really fast in Denmark. You have to be of place. Like, what did you eat as a kid that makes you go, oh my God, like, and brings you these memories from being a young child? And
did that make you a better baker? I mean, the idea that you had to really adapt. And like, if you look at the menu in the book, it's like, there's a lot of like Scandinavian baking in the book.
Yeah, it made me 100% a better baker. It made me grow up really fast. I learned a lot actually about wheat from other parts of the world. I was an American baker with American wheat, and now I've learned about a lot of European wheats and a lot of European breads.
Yeah.
So for sure, it made me a better baker.
What's a visit to Hart Bakery like? When we know it, I mean, if you watch the TV show, you're like, wow, this place is pretty fucking cool. But like, I'd like to get a sense just for our listeners, what's it like walking into your bakery? What's on the menu and stuff?
I was talking to my wife about this morning. She was like, it's lovely.
Well, that's a great answer. I'll take a lovely.
I think you go into Hart Bakery and I think you can feel that my personality is there. Like I want people to have fun at work and I want them to enjoy themselves. It's not corporate. It's not. I mean, we have 10 stops. It's not a chain. It's fun. You go there and you can feel the fun that the staff are having. And like, that is my first and foremost thing. Like staff are the most important thing to me. I will look after them first. If we have a big busy day, a holiday, Christmas, something like that, I'll make sure my staff have bread before my customers because they're the most important people. They work in, day out. And why shouldn't they have it for their families first?
That's great.
Yeah.
Are you doing like lamination? Are you doing like, what's the menu like? like?
Yeah, there's lamination, but like along the Danish palate, you know, like there's a custard tart that's it's called a Spandauer in Danish, something called a tea burgers, and like I can't say that right. You know, I can't even say bread in Danish. I lived there for 6 years. A tea burgers is like it has an almondy filling with a poppy seed top. It's kind of sweet and savory, and it's really delicious.
I had one at Trollhorn Market. I'm saying that obviously wrong as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember.
That's Helena.
Yeah, I say that.
I said it wrong too.
I literally.
I said it.
Did you pick up some? I mean, did you speak Danish when you? But
No. A lot of I have a few Danish friends, and they're like, just don't bother, man. Just don't bother. Like, because we're going to talk to you in English straight away.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to get back to the book because it really is a special book, and I got to really experience your baking by going to the QR codes. And I love that.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, Richard, it seems just looking at the way you're folding and the way you're mixing, it's like, and explain this to me for our listeners, it's like you're assertive but delicate. Like you know what you're doing, but you cannot touch this bread.
I'm super gentle and loving and delicate.
I know.
Because, you know, I see a lot of bakers and they're beating the shit out of their dough, and it really affects me because, like, you don't need to do that. So why are you being the boss and being this aggressive man that's slapping this dough? It doesn't need that. Like, it just needs time and patience and chill. And, you know, I'm very meditative as a baker, but like, I'll do what it needs and I'll be assertive, like you say. But like, I'm giving it's all my love is going into that loaf of bread. And, you know, I'm still making bread day in, day out, every day. I'm completely obsessed with it. I'll do it forever. And I'm honestly putting as much love into it as I can, and I'm teaching my staff to be more gentle, more delicate, because the more you beat it up, I think you're actually destroying it rather than making it better.
It seems that that's a big mistake. Homebread bakers make is touching it too much. What else? What are other mistakes that bread bakers are making at home?
I think people are a little nervous because they don't really know what they're doing, so they get a little anxious and. I think they'll just hold it wrong because they don't quite know. And you know what? I think I said it in the book. It's a bit like learning to play an instrument or something like that. You have to work at it. You're not going to be able to make great bread in first day, second day, third day. Like, you just got to keep going and learn it inside out and fall in love with it.
There's a lot of hot takes in the book, and I feel there's some lore in there too, and just like calling out these conversations you have, and it's a really readable book. One thing that really stuck out is that you don't really subscribe to the old sourdough starter mythology. This
has been quite controversial. It got put on Instagram recently, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." You know, like, it was quite a big thing. But the truth is, like, I think sourdough is just fermented flour. Like, it really is. Like, if you put flour and water together, it ferments. You don't need to put fucking grapes or rhubarb or whatever other shit people tell you to put in it. It's basically fermented flour. And so, you know what? If you chucked out your sourdough and then you mix flour and water together, it will start fermenting again. You know, like, and that's all it is. Like, there's yeast and bacteria living in this happy bucket of sourdough starter. That's it. It's as simple as that, if you ask me. So your culture after a few weeks of regular feedings will get more and more regular and active and happy and stuff like that. So, okay, fine. You know, you just keep feeding it regular and regular, but literally chuck out your sourdough, start again. You know, like, I just think it's a little precious, and it, you know, as I said, it's fermented flour.
So you're not naming your starter. There's no like puns.
I mean, actually, we have a sourdough starter at Hart Bakery that was given to me by Gabriele Bonci, which is for Levito Madre, which is for panettone. So we nicknamed that Danny Levito. So we have, that's the only thing fun. That's named.
All right, one name is okay.
Yeah. Because like one of my pastry chefs, she named Danny Levito, and it was too funny to not carry on.
It's cute.
Yeah.
I love the sentiment. I love the controversy. I'm sure we've had plenty of bread bakers and authors who have a very different opinion, but that's the beauty of it.
Okay, everyone's opinion is good. You know, like, whatever you think, everyone has their own opinion on what's good bread and how to do things. And so be it, man. You know what? That's just,
there's no orthodoxy in this game. All right, two-part question. Richard, describe the perfect loaf of bread of sourdough. First, aesthetically, when you're looking at it, and then next when you slice it and you have the crumb. So
Yeah.
what's the perfect bread?
So also, like I was talking about this yesterday about perfect bread. I make bread every day. I make bread every single day. And I think I make perfect bread once or twice a year. That's it. You know, like I make good bread. I make shit bread. I make all kinds of bread, the same as every other baker. But perfect bread doesn't happen very often. And I don't know what happens, how it happens, you know, but that's what gets me out of bed every day, excited to try and make a perfect loaf of bread. And a perfect loaf of bread for me is like it kind of blows up in an oven almost 4 times its original size. When you pick it up as a whole loaf, it's huge, but it's completely light. It feels super light, and you're like, well, this makes no sense. Like, how is it so light compared to how big it is? On the outside, it should be a mixture of colours. It should be like white from a little bit of flour from the basket, and then all shades of golden into reds, into dark reds, into black on a score. Like, it should have this colour that you look at it and you're like, oh my God, you know, like I really dislike seeing bread when it's just one beige, golden colour.
It feels
I feel
like industrial at that point.
Yeah, it feels industrial, exactly. Also, like this is up to the baker, but like personally, I love all these little blisters that you get on the outside of the crust. I feel like it reminds me of like when you're biting into a chicharron or something, this crispy crunchiness that you get from all these amazing little bubbles. And they also bring different colors to the loaf. So so it has a beautiful score. Or a slash. Like, I'm not really into like all these picture scores. Like, I think that's just a bit of a waste of time. I just want one big dirty slash or a couple of slashes in it, and like just let it blow up how it wants to. Beautiful color, really big and lightweight. This is a perfect loaf. Yeah, the inside, I mean, holy, slightly holy.
Yeah, slightly.
Slightly
What about
holy.
like a moisture inside?
Not gummy. Like, wet but not gummy, slightly holy. I think too holy stupid, because like, fucking hell, you've got to put butter and jam on that. You're not going to get it in there, you know, like, but yeah, holy, but just not crazy
With
holy.
structure.
Yeah.
Richard, what a beautiful description. I'm taken to a bread. Actually, Dan Richer in Jersey City has this bakery and pizzeria.
Yeah, I'm dying to meet him.
To be honest, that's the bread that you just described.
Yeah, okay.
He gave me a loaf one time.
Okay.
It's exactly what you said. I'm just giving Dan a little plug here.
I can't wait to meet him.
Yeah. Richard, many home cooks are intimidated by starting a bread routine. And it is a routine. We know that. We know that it's like many bread bakers will do it daily or twice a week. How can you, with your book and just your knowledge, you know, get people a little more confident to start this routine?
Yeah, I mean, in a way it's challenging, because looking after a sourdough is like a living thing that it needs to be fed every day. If you want to make bread with it every day and it be really consistent and you make great bread every day, it kind of needs feeding every day. And it's really difficult to do that in your home. I've really learned that over the last couple of years since I moved to Mexico, because right now I don't have a bakery. So I'm baking at home nearly every day. And if I come to New York or go here, what do I do with my sourdough? Actually, I've started drying my sourdough out. I put a spoonful of active sourdough in a ton of flour and turn it into like a breadcrumb consistency.
I've heard that.
And it stops it moving. And like, rather than just put my wet sourdough in the fridge, that will get way too acidic. If I put this flour mix in the fridge, it kind of goes dormant, and it really is quite a nice way to keep your sourdough. So I would suggest that for home bakers, for sure, because you can't look after it day in, day out. But if you can, and like you're at home and you're not going traveling, sure, you should feed it every day, because you know what? The yeast and bacteria, the symbiotic relationship, it needs it. It needs it to come. Like after you feed your sourdough for 4 hours, the yeast are starting to feed and multiply and do their thing. That's like a 4-hour time span at the right temperature. And then after that, they start to dwindle, and that's where all the bacteria start coming into play. But if you don't feed the yeast the next day, they don't get that spike and low. So I think it's really important to feed it regularly. You know, when it comes to making bread, again, like back to what I said a second ago, like you have to get into an intimate relationship with it. You have to learn it. You have to there's no cheat here. It's like learning a new language or learning an instrument or learning anything. Like if you don't dedicate yourself to it and do it regularly, it's not going to really happen.
And that's the joy that you meet a bread baker. And like when you're not in the club, and you're like, why are you making so much bread? But you meet these folks, and I've been able to travel with Mauricio Leo, terrific author, and he's got a large community.
Yeah, he makes amazing bread, doesn't he?
Amazing bread.
Yeah.
He's so cool. And I met a bunch of bakers. We went to Italy on this trip, and it's like, I get it. It's spiritual. It's like a routine.
It's like meditation. It really is. Like there's something about it that is, and it's really honest, and you have to be humble. You can't be all, I'm the shit and big shot and all this, because you know what? The minute you do that, you fuck it up the next day, and everyone comes and looks at your bread like, what the fuck's this shit? Being humble is really important, and being honest. Like at the end of the day, we all make mistakes. We all make good bread. We all make shit bread. Like that's fine. So yeah, I think it's a really honest, wonderful, beautiful, meditative thing.
On This Is Taste, we ask guests about the discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. Richard, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. The best fruit?
Banana.
Okay. How do you bake with bananas?
Bacon, actually, like Hart Bakery made the most incredible banana bread. And banana bread's a bit boring. Everyone makes banana bread. But this banana bread, you make a dry caramel and you pour it on top of your bananas in a mixer. And then you add all your other ingredients. And it is unbelievable.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Is that your recipe? You came up with that?
What?
You came up with that?
No, I didn't. One of my pastry chefs came up with it. And honestly, there's no other banana bread.
So great. The worst vegetable?
My worst, I love all vegetables, really. Or I try to. My worst eating vegetable is a too cooked carrot.
Yes. Like when it's been in the soup for too long.
Too cooked carrot.
Oh,
Yuck.
yeah. Yuck.
Yeah.
All right. What is your typical breakfast?
Yeah, probably toast with butter and Marmite or butter and marmalade.
Oh, marmalade. Do you make marmalade?
I don't make it. No, I buy it, but I love it. Yeah. It reminds me of my childhood when I was with my grandparents and stuff. Yeah.
The best dessert?
Yeah, for me, it would probably be like a rhubarb and custardy type thing. Maybe a brulee with rhubarb underneath it. I love creamy, sweet, and I love sour together. Yeah, so something like that.
The best bakery in the world that you do not run?
Oh, shit, man. Okay, so Wildflower Bread, which is in Freestone, California, near Occidental. It's an amazing hippie bakery. The thing that's sad about that is during COVID they closed the actual shop, and so you can't actually go in anymore. But it's true to its own identity. And then Mexico City, I love Rosetta.
Oh yeah,
I love Elena. I think she's the queen of bread.
A restaurant you wish you could bring back from the dead?
I love this. It's Ubuntu. I worked at Ubuntu when I moved to California. It was in Napa Valley. And Jeremy Fox, I think, is the chef's chef. Like I said, Danny Tenaglia is the DJ's DJ. Jeremy Fox is a legend, if you ask me. And I worked for him and I loved it.
Oh, man. You thank him well in the acknowledgement.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I love that part of your book. Your best restaurant meal of the past year?
Yeah, I think Bibi. It's a restaurant in London, in Mayfair. It's Indian food. Chet is the chef. I think it's incredible. It's not what you expect. It's definitely worth a visit.
Last one, your favorite sandwich?
Yeah, I would say a Reuben on marble rye.
Oh, man. I love the choice. Okay, so where did you first encounter the Reuben? Because I'm imagining it wasn't in London.
No, it was in the States. I didn't even know what marble rye was until I moved to the States. So I fell in love with the bread. I think it's an incredible bread. I love caraway seeds in the bread. The marble rye, the way it's brown and white all in one marble thing, it makes me so happy just looking at it. And then a Reuben was here for sure, and it would have been in Petaluma in one of the sandwich places.
Well, Richard Hart, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you very much.
Lukas Volger, welcome to This Is Taste. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on here. I'm really, truly a big fan of this podcast, and I always learn so much, and you guys do such good work. It's an honor to be here.
So kind of you. Thanks for checking it out. I appreciate it. Lots of episodes in the archives.
So many.
Yeah. And we're here to talk about a lot of things. You know, you've been really a fixture of food writing and cookbooks for a while, and you've written for Taste, and just I've loved collaborating with you on pieces. But we're here for the Bread Machine book, which is, to me, such an accomplishment. I think you've done something that I think others have tried. There are other Bread Machine books, but this is the best one. I mean, you're giving us a reason not just to bake bread, but to bake bread more simply with a bread machine. I'll just ask you from the jump, what drew you to the project to use a bread machine as like the focus of a bread book?
Well, in my work over the past 15 years, I've focused on I've written a lot of vegetarian cookbooks and focused on sort of vegetarian stuff. But my first food job was working at a bakery in Boise, Idaho, which is a bread bakery. And that was really what got me excited about doing professional work in food. And so my deepest roots are in baking, even though that's not really those aren't the types of recipes that I work on all the time. And so bread has always, I mean, you know, through the tartine years, I had my sourdough starter going. I've put a few bread recipes in various cookbooks. It's always been something I do, but it's not really anything that I like advertise or even consider myself to be like a total professional about. Yeah. The bread machine is interesting to me because, as I write in the book, it was my first experience of like cooking in the in the kitchen growing up in the early 90s, and it sort of. As I write in the book, the breads that we made at the time were these like gummy ones from a box mix, and like by any sort of measure, they were not necessarily good bread, but I thought that they were really delicious bread, and it was exciting to me to be baking with my own hands and making things with my own hands, and that kind of like activated this interest. And then it was 5 or 6 years ago that I had and then when I worked in this professional bakery, I was pretty sure I outgrew the bread machine. But then a few, 5 or 6 years ago, I had an opportunity to test out a bunch of bread machines for like a product testing for Epicurious. And it kind of made, I went into it very skeptically. And I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool, because I'd always thought that the bread machine was this like set it and forget it, like, as I write in the book, it was like a replacement for a bread making practice, as I'd gone through various stages of my life. Like, it's definitely a practice keeping a sourdough starter. The bread sort of owns the schedule. You build your life around making the bread. And I thought the bread machine was supposed to just replace all that with the press of a button. And I found that it was actually great for enhancing a bread machine practice or a bread baking practice. Yeah. Like, there's certainly ways you can use it to just dump all the ingredients, press start, and you'll have a loaf of bread in a couple hours. But what I found myself doing was, isolating certain features and being able to sort of automate or streamline certain aspects of the bread making process, like the kneading and the proofing, and then having a little bit of hands-on time with the shaping, maybe baking it in my home oven, or, doing it all in the bread machine. But it just became this thing that I realized was a little bit more flexible than I had thought.
I mean, there's hacks, you call them. Like, you're basically hacking into the code a little bit. And it's brilliant. Like, I think it really does skip steps, but it doesn't fully, change the way you're baking bread at home. You're still making something, right? I want to ask you, I think for our listeners who've maybe heard of a bread machine but don't really know much more, how does it actually work?
It's actually pretty simple. So, there's so many out there, but all of them consist of a couple parts. There's like a pan that serves as sort of like the baking pan and also the mixing pan. It has this attachment of a paddle that fits in the bottom. Some of them have 2 paddles. My favorite bread machine, the Zojirushi Virtuoso Plus, has 2 paddles.
That's from Japan.
That's from Japan. They make the best rice cooker as well. It has 2 paddles, but so there's a pan with a paddle in it. Then the overall machine, you sort of insert the pan and it snaps in, and this connects the paddle to a motor, and then that mixes the bread. At the bottom of the machine, in most models of the bottom of the machine, there's a heating coil, and that's like the heating element that sets the temperature for proofing and for baking. And then it just kind of seals up, and there's some kind of computer mechanism that has the secrets to all the various programs for like making wheat bread, regular, white bread, or just proofing dough or whatever.
And there's incremental differences in those settings.
Yeah.
Tied to the recipes. So what I like about the book, and I think this is really important, is you have obviously a process and ingredients, but you're really clear that you have to go in order. There's like an order to dropping in the ingredients, right?
I think that's pretty true for all bread machines. Sometimes, a lot of the cookbooks of the early 2000s and 90s, they say put the ingredients into the bread machine in the order that your manual specifies. But every bread machine that I use had the same, which is you put the wet ingredients in the bottom and the dry ingredients on the top and yeast last, because you don't want to have the yeast and the salt interact, because I guess that can interfere with the yeast's activity. But I just put for every bread machine that I've used, and I tested out, a dozen of them had the same system. So I just say, like, put the wet ingredients at the bottom and dry ingredients at the top.
Yeah, and I mean, the recipes are written with such skill, too. And there's so many versions of bread and styles of bread. I want to zoom out briefly, and you admit that the bread machine is not perfect, which I love, because, you can't just, like, say that everything is perfect for a contraption to bake. I mean, there's lots of different variables. So what's imperfect about it, but why does that make it such a cool thing to cook with?
The baking is really the weakest part of the process, just because it's like a lot of so the heating element is, most of them have at the bottom, the zojirushi that I mentioned, it has, it circulates the heat and has some kind of heating implement at the top, but they just don't bake evenly. The temperature is relatively low, so you don't often get much of a crust. The coloring is often uneven. Sometimes even like the evenness of the crumb, because of the baking, isn't great. The better bread machines are obviously better at doing this. What I've done in the book to circumnavigate this sort of weakness of the bread machine is give you sort of two options for each recipe, which is that you can sort of mix and proof the dough in the bread machine and then shape and bake it in your home oven, which is primarily what I do these days, just because I also like handling the dough, and I like it produces a more attractive loaf. Or you can use this sort of set it and forget it, just press a button.
Yeah, and you can try it both ways, of course. I think it's such a key point, because I think many maybe don't realize that the mixing and proofing part can be done automatically. And that saves you time, right? Like, that would be something that a busy person who wants to bake bread but also wants to shape and use their own oven, this is like the ultimate kind of hack to that, right?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's so great. I know that as I was working on this, I was like, why is this so much easier than like grabbing my like KitchenAid stand mixer and just mixing the dough, using the dough hook and, leaving it there in the warm kitchen to proof. And it just, first off, it's a little warmer than what they typically recommend for proofing dough. It's usually around higher than 80 degrees. And I think ideally it's like 75 to 80. So it proofs faster probably than non-bread machine breads. But it's so automated, and like I'm a evangelist for the digital scale, and you just take the bread machine pan, set it on the digital scale, put your ingredients in there, plug it in the bread and press a button, and like the dough mixes. It contains, there's no mess.
Yeah.
You don't use any measuring cups when you use, obviously when you use the scale. It just is so easy.
Yeah.
And it's really nice for making like pizza dough or for making cinnamon rolls, or those just when you only need the dough and then you're going to shape and portion things off, or I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. It's like once you've made a bunch of bread, I think you do this and you're like, oh, yeah, this is great.
You've explained it really well, and I'll just clarify and say, like, when you're using the KitchenAid and using traditional bread baking methods, there's a mess. I mean, it
is kind of messy.
It's kind of all over the place, and you kind of have to transfer. But like, if you have that proofing step without it leaving the vessel, that's just like, and then you have this nice dough, and then take us through like the way you would maybe not hit the button and say bake, but like shape it. Like, what's that process like?
Most machines have a dough function. And so what that, on most of them, it mixes the dough and then kneads it, and then it goes through like the bulk rise of the dough. And sometimes there's a couple punch downs in there, but it just takes you through the process up until you would take it out, up until the machine would then do the final shaping and let it proof and then bake it.
Explain what a punch down is for those who don't know.
It just deflates the dough.
Yeah.
So that it gives it a little bit more strength.
Yeah, and like that's key because when you are baking bread without a automated machine, you have to actually set your watch and return to the kitchen to do punch downs.
Yeah.
Back and
Exactly.
forth.
There's some supervision required.
Yeah, exactly. And you that's bread baking is great. You probably do that all the time, but like we don't have that time.
Yeah, this is. I mean, yeah, exactly. This is what I think. This is. I'm like not the first person to be like the bread machine is amazing and such a time saver. This is. I had thought it had been this '90s appliance that went out of fashion, and then once I was working on this book and had that assignment, I realized like, oh, these never went away. People have been obsessed with these for the last 30 years, and many, thousands, I have no idea, but like many people have
Let's
been
just say millions.
passionate about their bread machines without
I'm going to say millions,
slowing down. Okay.
At least in the world, but we'll say in America, millions of using the bread machine. I think that's fair. And I think part of making bread, right, is this a practice? And I've had like Mauricio Leo in here talking about his practice with the perfect loaf, and I love the way he writes so colorfully about bread baking. And when you meet a bread baker, you get into the sense that it's part of like a daily or weekly thing.
It's a life.
Talk about that a little bit about why baking bread has so many benefits.
I just read the Richard Hart cookbook, and he was like, there's going to be so many like bum loaves, but you just keep going, and then you get a really good one, and then the next day there's a bum loaf, or the next day. So it's just like, it really is a practice in the sense that like it's not a perfect result every time. It's like it's just the modicum of a dial, and like there's a learning every time, and there's like always these factors that are changing regardless of like how much you try to control them. And it just teaches, it just activates all the senses. It engages your brain in such a way, it becomes like this ever elongating, thing that you do that you learn from, and then you have like fresh bread all the time, which is amazing.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think having fresh bread has lots of benefits. I mean, if you have a loaf or two a week, you're obviously saving some money. There's like that element, but also like, what's it like having fresh bread in your house?
I mean, it's great. It's dangerous because it's when I was working on during the like busiest parts of working on this book, there would be 4 or 5 loaves of bread out at any given time, and I love bread, but also need to get my vegetables in and all the other things. So I think it's best when you do like a loaf every other day.
Yeah, definitely. But it's just nice to have like fresh bread around.
Yeah, so nice.
Obviously,
and the smell is so good.
It smells amazing. You have like a family, you want to making a ton of sandwiches, or with your dinner, you want to have a fresh loaf of bread there. With lots of
and this is when I get together with my family. My brother lives out in Nevada. He'll be like, "Oh, we're gonna make burgers or something." I'll be like, "Oh, you know what? Let me whip up the hamburger buns." And it's actually you have a couple hours. You can. I don't know if it sounds kind of crazy to be like, I'm just going to whip up hamburger buns. But once you are in the sort of rhythm of having a quote unquote bread practice, it really is not that big of a deal. And the bread machine, I swear to God, you just dump the stuff in there, and then a couple hours later, you're going to have fresh hamburger buns coming out of the oven.
Very cool. So Lukas, how did you decide on organizing the book, and take us through the way a baker can kind of use the book?
I definitely wanted to have like a chapter of sort of distinctive sweet recipes and distinctive savory recipes. I wanted to have a chapter of classics, and I wanted to have a chapter of like sourdough recipes. So those were kind of in there from the beginning. Then I found, as I was working, this whole like dough component of being able to just like quickly mix the dough in the machine was so appealing to me, and it just really made everyday baking. I don't know. It just opened that chat. It opened my kitchen up so magically that I wanted to have a whole chapter that I called loaf adjacent in the cookbook, and that's like pizza doughs or focaccia or cinnamon rolls or things like that. And so once I sort of got that organization down, it was a matter of narrowing down the recipes and like which ones sort of feel like standalone recipes that aren't necessarily like variations on another one, and that give the book a full round sort of flavor profile, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And you see it when you just open the book. You've got the sourdough section, which to me, we love sourdough. And you talk about, of course, what a starter is and how you make a starter, but you can actually use a bread machine for sourdough. You can get these coveted flavors pretty easily, right?
I did find I don't have like 100% sourdough breads in here. They're like hybrid.
Yeah, they're like your version of it for the bread machine.
So you use a little bit of instant yeast, and that just helps to sort of follow the timeline of these preset programs that the bread machine have. There are people who do, and if you want to make 100% sourdough loaf in a bread machine, you just isolate each individual function. So you mix the dough, and then you proof it, and you either pull it out of the machine or just leave it in the machine unplugged and let it proof for as many hours as, do the bulk rise as long. The same thing after you shape it. You could just isolate the different functions and bake any kind of bread in the bread machine, really.
Yeah. I love that section. And what about like let's talk about the sweet side, because that to me, you can make dessert in here quite often.
Yeah. So there's a dessert chapter in addition to the loaf adjacent, and there is a cookbook that I love, and every sort of veg head person I know loves is Deborah Madison's Vegetarian Cooking for Everyone. And she has this yeasted sugar cake recipe in there, and there's only like a handful of desserts in it, but I love them. And one of them is this like yeasted cake. I've come to learn that this is like a style of sort of like pre-leavening, like baking powder, baking soda cake, and it's not too sweet, and it's coated in sugar, and the fact that it involves yeast came to mind as I was working on this book. I was like, oh, you could make like one of those not too sweet yeasted cakes. And so I have a whole chapter of these. They're kind of hard to describe because they come out of the bread machine looking like a bread machine loaf of bread, and I give them a little bit of like adornment, like a sprinkling of sugar or something, and they have like almost it's somewhere between like a loaf of bread and like a pound cake texture. They're a little bit squishy, but they're so nice for being not that sweet. And the bread machine is like so perfect for making them, because when you make it, by hand, it's kind of a sticky, difficult to work with dough, but the bread machine, streamlines and solves for that.
And then you pull it out of the machine and you shape it.
No, these ones are best if you just use the preset function.
It's like a pan, so it's like a pan loaf.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can sort of transfer it to a cake pan if you want to do that, or a loaf pan.
But the bread pan is going to be perfect for, I'm thinking like coffee break, like 3 p.m., 4 p.m., have a nice...
There's a really good like buckwheat sort of breakfast cake that's buckwheat flour and a little bit of a streusel-y component on the top. It's so good with tea and coffee in the morning, or like an afternoon tea situation.
I mean, you could do this the night before in some ways, right? Essentially, I mean, you just like you set it, you bake it, and it's there in the morning.
And the bread's done in the morning,
using the machine's presets. Yeah, I mean, there's a stigma. We haven't talked about it. There's like a little bit of a stigma with this machine, and I think like home cooks always aspire to do everything from scratch, and especially with project cooking and baking, but that's not real talk, right? That's not real.
Yeah.
You don't have time.
I mean, I'm just like, the people that I've in my career that I've been so inspired by are people who truly cook every day. And I like used to teach classes fairly regularly, and people would come to these classes because they're like, oh, I want to eat more vegetables, or I want my family to eat more vegetables, or my kids went to college and it's just now I can eat what I want to eat and I want to eat more vegetables. But like, I was like, you've been like cooking with your family for the last 20 years, like, what do I have to teach you?
Right.
You are like so deep in this like practice. And so I just have like so much respect for people who really do cook every day. And the bread machine to me is something that makes it possible to have fresh bread every day. And there's ways to make really great bread using it too.
So let's go back to a little gear talk. So you did this test for Epi, and you tested all these brands, but you landed on one that you really love. Tell us about this one machine, and this is an endorsement. I mean, you should get some money, by the way.
No, this is not an endorsement, but they have helped me put a giveaway out there so you can win one of these bread machines. So it's the Zojirushi Virtuoso Plus. It is a behemoth of a bread machine. It's like, rather than one of those sort of like tall, narrow canister style appliances, it looks like it's kind of like bigger than a toaster oven. It's like one of those big Breville toaster ovens. Mm-hmm. It has a traditional shaped loaf pan. So if you bake the bread entirely in the machine, you're going to have a normal looking slice of bread rather than like the tall ones that come from the R2D2 ones.
Yeah.
These have 2 paddles, and so the motor is a lot stronger too. But they have 2 paddles, so it kneads the dough with 2 paddles, and it makes a lot stronger doughs. As I mentioned, there's a heating element that is in the top, so they bake a lot more evenly. They also, I haven't seen any other bread machine that does this, but there's this capacity to create custom programs. So you can create 3 custom programs, which is really fantastic if you're somebody who like wants to be able to really customize things and you know what you're doing and you know how to make bread, or you want, so if you, for like a sourdough situation where you wanted a much longer bulk rise, you can set that. So you can mix all the dough in there, set the bulk rise, you can set the punch downs, everything. From there, pull it out, bake it in the oven, or, you know, then continue on and have the machine shape it and then bake it. And if it needs longer baking time, it needs less baking time, you can create these settings.
Yeah.
So that's a really nice feature if you want to have more control.
And that's a little more expensive, right?
They're like $400.
Yeah, $400. I mean, that's a big investment. Yeah. Are there any other models or like more affordable?
Well, I think if this idea of using the bread machine to primarily like mix and proof dough appeals, then any bread machine is going to do that really pretty well. Even the cheapest ones. The distinguishing factors are really the baking. So if you don't plan to bake on it all the time, you can use any of them. I have like a Cuisinart, so I cross-tested all these recipes on the Zojirushi Virtuoso Plus.
Yeah.
And then you
should get like $5 every time you say that.
They've been so like friendly and supportive.
No.
Yeah, they're great. And then on the cheaper sort of like $60 Cuisinart. And again, like everything kind of works. The baking is where the nicer machine stands apart.
Definitely. I mean, $60, that's a little better. I mean, that's
and you
nice.
can find these on like used appliances, you know, like Facebook Marketplace, or there's this company called, now I'm blanking on the name of it, but they basically have set up a rental company for appliances. So people who live in New York and have limited kitchen space don't need to have an ice cream machine, but they'd like to be able to make ice cream in it. They do have this for bread machines, so you can sort of rent them for a few days.
Oh, that's fun.
And a lot of cities, these things are popping up.
See if you like it. I mean, if you're in a town with a Goodwill.
Yeah, exactly.
There's some bread machines in those Goodwills.
Yeah,
because there was a boom, like a little bit of the history, like like the '90s. Is that when it was? The '80s? Yeah,
the '90s, early to sort of late '90s is my experience of it. Again, I think there's a lot of people who have been using them very religiously ever since then. But I remember just when I was a kid, I was so infatuated with it because my friends' moms were like making this bread. I was like, what is that? This fresh, squishy bread that you can like smear with margarine and it's so delicious. And then they all kind of like disappeared slowly after that.
Well, definitely pick up the book. I love it. It's such a wonderful addition to other bread books you may have. Again, Perfect Loaf is a great one. I love that Rich Bar book. I love
that book too, yeah.
Yeah, those are all both terrific books, but this one's a nice accompaniment to those other books. Talk about your Substack.
Oh, yeah.
What have you been writing these days? I've checked it out. It's nice work.
Oh, thank you. I've been going for like 2 years, maybe a little over 2 years. And, you know, I've been doing this for a while. I started out with Blogspot and Tumblr and like just kind of was one thing changes to the next. I hop aboard. Substack is great. It's once a week I send out a recipe. Typically it's like I'm trying to like respond to what people want, and it feels like people are really wanting like sort of high protein vegetarian recipes. So I do mostly that, though I throw some bread in there and throw some desserts in there.
Yeah.
It's just like nice to have. I love the schedule, the structure of it. And
it's a beautiful thing to have a recipe arrive in your inbox. What's the Substack called?
It's called Family Friend, but it's my name.substack.com.
I will link to that in the show notes. Definitely subscribe. Check it out. Lukas Volger, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you so much. This is such a pleasure.
This Is Taste is hosted and produced by Eliza Barbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumbert and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.